All right, Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rachaha Kodash. Double honors to the head apostle and elders of Great Millstone who rule well and teach well. This is the brother Mattathiah from the GMS Virginia camp coming to you through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai. Yahweh being the true, holy, and powerful name of the Heavenly Father. Yahweh Shai being the true, holy, and powerful name of his only begotten Son, whom this world ignorantly calls Jesus and Christ. Bahashem is in the name, and Lord willing, this will be an edifying lesson. And I want to touch on this video from Dabu 7 entitled Mysterious 12-Mile Thick Structure Discovered Beneath Bermuda, and that's concerning the Bermuda Triangle, is unlike anything else on Earth. And I'm going to go ahead and play this short video clip before I speak upon it. So without further ado, here we go.
Bermuda Triangle. As you can see here, they say that they have discovered this mysterious structure on the ocean floor that shouldn't be there. There's only one like it around the entire planet, so they're saying, and that this has never happened before. This is roughly a 12-mile thick structure or layer that sits in this area of Bermuda specifically. And they say that for some reason, back when it was volcanically active, that it did not deflate. Most volcanoes, when they spew everything and they're done, they deflate down. That apparently did not happen here. They say that there's some kind of weird pocket keeping everything afloat in this area. They're not sure how it got there. Of course, they can't explain a lot of things. And Bermuda, the Bermuda Triangle, has a lot of mystery surrounding it, period. There's all the talk of Atlantis being in this region in ancient times and that it sank. Well, if none of this area around Bermuda never deflated, never sank, then how could that be the case? You could almost rule this region around Bermuda out because it never fell into the ocean. It never sank. Areas around it, though, would be different. They don't specify if there's any other regions remotely like this in the area or anything. They just talk about this one, which means this 12-mile region here is kind of special. It's got Bermuda floating, so to speak, in an area where it shouldn't be, or else it would sink some 1,600 feet below the waves and you'd never see it again. So whatever this structure is or is made of and how it really got there, we don't know. We're just going off of what they're saying right now. They lie to us constantly.
So there you go. This very large structure or being in the Bermuda Triangle, what you see on the screen is, roughly part of the Atlantic Ocean leaning into the Caribbean Sea, etc., where many so-called mysteries, many disappearances of ships and planes frequently go missing in this particular area of the ocean. Okay. Now I want to go into a little AI overview concerning the Bermuda Triangle and sea serpents. All right. Which, is going to lead us into the topic of this video concerning that sea serpent, that colossal creature that the scripture speaks about called Leviathan. Okay. It says, while the Bermuda Triangle is famous for disappearances, stories of sea serpents and monsters like the Kraken or Lucica are folklore, often explained by misidentified large marine life like giant oarfish, whales, or eels, or unexplained phenomenons with sightings sometimes linked to dramatic decompositions or large animals like the globster, or exaggerated of real large creatures mistaken for mythical beasts. Okay. And, we know that the powers that be hide information and push disinformation concerning certain creatures, colossal creatures, as well as Leviathan in the ocean, in the sea. All right, let's go to 2 Ezra chapter 13 and 52. And only a very, very small portion of the sea has even been discovered. This is 2 Ezra 13 and 52. It says, and he said unto me, like as thou canst neither seek out nor know the things that are in the deep sea, even so can no man upon earth see my son or those that be with him, but in the daytime. Okay, so the sea is very, very vast. All right, and only a very small portion of the sea has been discovered. Now, real quick, let's jump over to Psalms 104 and let's go down to verse 25. It says, so is this great and wide sea wherein things creeping innumerable. All right, Esau has only discovered or so-called identified a very, very small portion of the animals, the sea creatures in the ocean. Okay, and in even a smaller portion concerning the depths of the ocean. When you go to the very, very deep parts of the ocean where there is no light, the sea creatures, the fish, etc., change dramatically. Okay, and Esau is even done to this day identifying so-called new specimens, species, etc. It says, so is this great and wide sea wherein things creeping innumerable, both small and great beasts. Okay, so this sea contains both small and great beasts. All right, let's read that in NLT. It says, here is this ocean vast and wide, teeming with life of every kind, both large and small. And a part of those great beasts in the sea is Leviathan. Okay, I want to jump back a little bit in this video because Dabu 7 made a statement concerning this particular 12-mile structure that you see on the right of your screen, that it was once so-called identified as a underwater volcano, right? Let's see if I can find that. Let me jump back a little bit in this video.
Shouldn't be there. There's only one like say that they have discovered this mysterious structure on the ocean floor that shouldn't be there. There's only one like it around the entire planet, so they're saying, and that this has never happened before. This is roughly a 12-mile thick structure or layer that sits in this area of Bermuda specifically. And they say that for some reason, back when it was volcanically active, that it did not deflate. Most volcanoes, when they spew everything and they're done, they deflate down.
Okay, so this was considered at one point a active volcano under the water. All right, you know, which I think this right here very well could be, you know, one of the leviathans that you're witnessing under the sea, right? Because, like the scripture says, what comes out of, you know, what can Leviathan spew or shoot out of his mouth? Let's get that real quick. Let's go to the book of Job, chapter 41, and I'm gonna jump around in this particular chapter, but I want to start in verse 19 and read to 21. This is Job 41 and 19. It says, out of his mouth, and this concerning Leviathan, it says, out of his mouth go burning lamps, and sparks of fire leap out. Out of his nostrils goeth smoke, as out of a seething pot or a cauldron. His breath kindleth coals, and a flame goeth out of his mouth. So they very well could have labeled this an active volcano, knowingly or unknowingly. And you know, what are they trying to keep it secret, and they know it's a colossal beast figure, etc. You know, or they actually thought it was a volcano, you know. But nevertheless, this very well could be Leviathan, and that volcanic material coming out of the depths of the sea could very well be Leviathan, you know, spewing this particular substance, okay, from his mouth, like we just read in Job 41, right? Let's read that in the NLT real quick. Bear with me one moment. Job 41. Let's see what that says. This is Job 41:19. It says, lightning leaps from its mouth, flames of fire flash out, smoke streams from its nostrils like steam from a pot overheated over burning rushes. Okay. It says its breath would kindle coals, for flames shoot from its mouth. So this very well could be Leviathan under the sea, because we know that Leviathan is in the ocean, is in the water, which we're going to get into a little bit further here shortly. I want to replay that one more time.
That shouldn't be there. There's only one like it around the entire planet, so they're saying, and that this has never happened before. This is roughly a 12-mile thick structure or layer that sits in this area of Bermuda specifically. And they say that for some reason, back when it was volcanically active, that it did not deflate. Most volcanoes, when they spew everything and they're done, they deflate down. That apparently did not happen here. They say that there's some kind of weird pocket keeping everything afloat in this area. They're not sure how it got there. Of course, they can't explain a lot of things. And Bermuda, the Bermuda Triangle, has a lot of mystery surrounding it, period.
Yeah, there's a lot of mysteries concerning the Bermuda Triangle, but not just the Bermuda Triangle. There's also something called the Devil's Triangle. All right, that there's mysterious sightings, old quote unquote folklore of sea serpents and monsters. Right, when you go into history of all these various different nations, every nation has a story of a dragon, a sea monster, a sea creature. Okay, and why is that? Right now, concerning the Bermuda Triangle, let me look that up real quick. Matter of fact, I want to see how many ships have gone missing in the Bermuda Triangle region. Okay, so it says not an exact number exists, but a popular legend cites over 50 ships and 20 planes vanishing mysteriously. So these are, disappearances. These aren't just like where a ship may have sunk or a plane may have crashed. There is no remnants ever recovered of these ships or of these planes. And we know Leviathan is a colossal creature. So the capabilities of Leviathan being able to take down a plane, okay, is what's the word I'm looking for? Leviathan has the ability to do that, so to speak. Okay. It says, though official sources like the NOAA confirm no unusual frequency attributed to the disappearances to weather, human error, or the area's heavy traffic, with real wrecks being far more numerous, but explained by natural hazards like reefs. And I believe, some of these top officials know exactly what's going on concerning concerning the Bermuda Triangle and the various other mysterious locations where disappearances happen in the ocean. But for obvious reasons, they're keeping it hidden. Okay, when you go into these ESOL's different military branches like the Navy, the Air Force, and even the Army, etc., the Marines, these naval officers, these Air Force pilots, they come in contact and witness various different things on duty, mainly concerning the chariots, the so-called UFOs. And in their sightings, they're forced to sign NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, to not speak about certain things for a period of time or indefinitely. Okay. And you can do your research, check out the NITSM encounters or the NITSM files on YouTube, where these non-disclosure agreements have expired, and now these naval officers, these Air Force pilots who witness the so-called UFOs, the so-called UAPs, are now allowed to speak about their encounters and what they witnessed. All right. It says, and this is concerning the Bermuda Triangle still, it says 50 ships, 20 planes, a frequently repeated number of mysterious disappearances. Thousands of lives. Some sources mention over 8,000 lives lost since the mid 19th century. And this is just that particular area, that triangle in Bermuda, or circling around Bermuda. It says hundreds of shipwrecks, over 300 documented wrecks surrounded Bermuda alone, but most have natural explanations. Okay. So there you have it. Let's go back to Psalms chapter 104 and verse 25. It says, "So is this great and wide sea, wherein things creeping innumerable, both small and great beasts. There go the ships. There is that Leviathan, whom thou hast made to play therein." So these disappearances, these ships going missing, and even possibly these planes going missing, could be because Leviathan got a hold of them. All right. Verse 27, these wait all upon thee, that thou mayest give them their meat in due season. Okay. Now let's go to Job chapter 41, Salakia. Matter of fact, before we go to Job 40, let's go to the book of Sirach, chapter 39, verse 28. Because these colossal creatures, and there's more giant creatures, colossal creatures, that aren't Leviathan. All right. Now we know Leviathan is, the most colossal creature created, you know what I'm saying, that's in the sea. But there's also very, very large unidentified creatures, concerning, even concerning, these sharks. They call them, what does Esau call these giant sharks? There's actually a name for them, but Esau pushes the narrative that's a myth, that there's not 50, 60, 70-foot sharks in the sea, right, when there actually is. And there's actually a word for these sharks. It's just slipped my mind, but there are very, very giant squids, giant octopuses, right, that have been reported to going into the old so-called folklore, that had been reported to taking down ships, right? It says there be spirits that are created for vengeance. This is Sirach 39:28. There be spirits that are created for vengeance, which in their fury lay on sore strokes. In the time of destruction, they pour out their force and appease the wrath of him that made them. All right. These spirits that are created for vengeance have been created by Yahweh, by Shem Yahushua, for a particular purpose. And you best believe Leviathan has a purpose. All right. Now let's go to the book of Job, chapter 41. And I'm just going to go through this whole chapter, because this is concerning that colossal creature, Leviathan. This is Job 41:1. And matter of fact, I think I'm going to read this in the NLT. Bear with me one moment. Let's see here. All right, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to read the first part of it in the KJV. Then I'm going to switch to the middle latter part, to the NLT. This is Job 41:1. It says, "Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook, or his tongue with a cord which thou lettest down? Canst thou put an hook into his nose and bore his jaw through with a thorn?" And you best believe Esau has tried to explore, these certain encounters, just like you see on the screen, to see what exactly it is. All right. And you best believe they probably have came in contact or have gotten close enough to know that, oh, this is a sea monster, a giant sea monster. All right, let's get the hell out of here. Right. Verse 3. It reminds me of what was that out in Antarctica? You had years ago, there was a giant creature under the ice, what do they call them? The giant icebergs. Okay, out there in Antarctica. And you saw that thing move and move a whole ice shelf the size of Manhattan. And it was all on film. Okay. That very well could have been Leviathan as well. It says, "Canst thou put an hook into his nose, or bore his jaw through with a thorn? Will he make many supplications unto thee? Will he speak soft words unto thee? Will he make a covenant with thee? Wilt thou take him for a servant forever? Wilt thou play with him as with a bird, or wilt thou bind him for thy maidens? You're not going to be able to treat Leviathan like you do these various other creatures, subdue them, put them in cages, put bait on a hook, and draw him out to sea. To put him on display or his bones on display, right? For people to see. Verse 6. Shall the companions make a banquet of him? Shall they part him among the merchants? Right? Let's read that in NLT. And as a matter of fact, let's skip up to verse 5 in the NLT. It says, can you make it a pet like a bird, or give it to your little girls to play with? Will merchants try to buy it to sell it in their shops? It says, verse 7, back in the KJV, is, canst thou fill his skin with barbed irons, or his head with fish spears? Lay thy hand upon him, remember the battle, do no more. So there's not, Esau doesn't have anything that can take down Leviathan, to capture Leviathan, right? To put Leviathan to death so they can put him on display for the world to see. It says, verse 9, behold, matter of fact, let's read verse 8 again in NLT. It says, if you lay a hand on it, you will certainly remember the battle that follows. You won't try that again. All right. So Esau very well probably has gotten close enough to Leviathan, maybe even try to use one of his weapons against him, an atomic bomb, etc., under the water. Okay. Tried various different measures to discover what this is, and even try to take it down. And like the saying goes, fuck around and found out. They found out, and they said, okay, well, leave that alone. All right. We're not. All right. Leave that alone. And we know that there's more than one Leviathan. Okay. Let's read that again. It says, if you lay a hand on it, you will certainly remember the battle that follows. You won't try that again. Okay. And Esau very well could have tried, and as you see, he's not trying again. It says verse 9 NLT, it says, no, it is useless to try to capture it. The hunter who attempts it will be knocked down. Okay, so it's useless to try to capture, defeat, apprehend, or entice Leviathan. Verse 10, it says, and since no one dares to disturb it, who then can stand up to me? Like you heard in this video, they labeled it as an active volcano, but that very well just could have been misinformation, because they knew actually what this 12-mile wide thick structure actually is.
They say that they have discovered this mysterious structure on the ocean floor that shouldn't be there. There's only one like it around the entire planet, so they're saying, and that this has never happened before. This is roughly a 12-mile thick structure or layer that sits in this area of Bermuda specifically. And they say that for some reason, back when it was volcanically active, that it did not deflate. Most volcanoes, when they spew everything and they're done, they deflate down. That apparently did not happen here. They say that there's some kind of weird pocket keeping everything afloat in this area. They're not sure how it got there. Of course, they can't explain a lot of things. And Bermuda, the Bermuda Triangle, has a lot of mystery surrounding it, period. There's all the talk of Atlantis.
It's Job 41:10 again. It says, and since no one dares to disturb it, who then can stand up to me? Verse 11, and I'm reading in NLT. It says, who has given me anything that I need to pay back? Everything under heaven is mine. And that's concerning the Heavenly Father, Yahweh, whom the world ignorantly calls God. Verse 12, I want to emphasize Leviathan's limbs and its enormous strength and graceful form. Who can stripe off its hide, or who can penetrate its double layer armor. So the Heavenly Father has created Leviathan, where, you know, Esau's missiles, Esau's various different weapon technology, right, is useless against Leviathan. It says, who can strip off his hide, or who can penetrate its double layer of armor? Who can pry open its jaws, for its teeth are terrible. Its scales are like rows of shields tightly sealed together. They are so close together that no air can get between them. Each scale sticks tight to the next. They interlock and cannot be penetrated. So the scriptures say Leviathan's armor, his body armor, so to speak, you know, his skin, the thick skin, is unpenetrable. All right. It says, verse 18, when it sneezes, it flashes light. Its eyes are like the red of dawn. Let's read that in KJV. It says, by his sneezings, a light doth shine, and his eyes are like the eyelids of the morning. So, you know, if you can just picture that in your mind, you know, when you see the sunrise, all right, coming over the horizon, which is very, very large, you know, hey, well, that's being compared to the eyes of Leviathan, you know. And, you know, I believe people have actually witnessed Leviathan in the sea, okay, and encountered this colossal creature. And the spirit probably left them by the sight of this creature, right? Let's get that real quick. That's let's see here. I believe that's Wisdom of Solomon, the 11th chapter. Bear with me one moment. You know, because you can imagine seeing a colossal creature miles and miles wide, miles and miles long, you know, coming out the ocean, or even being under the ocean and seeing it. You know, the spirit just going to leave you on sight. This is a Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 11. I think it's around the 17th verse. Here it is, Wisdom of Solomon 11 and 17. It says, for the almighty hand that made the world of matter without form wanted not means to send among them a multitude of bears or fierce lions or unknown wild beasts. Okay, so there's unknown wild beasts that have not been identified, not just in the ocean, primarily the ocean, but also on land as well. All right, the scriptures speak about in Job, I believe the 40th chapter, about the dinosaurs, which Esau likes to push, that are extinct. Okay, but you know, there are dinosaurs, you know, obviously still in the sea, okay, but also on land as well, that have not been discovered, so to speak. Okay, it says verse 18, or unknown wild beasts full of rage, newly created, breathing out either a fiery vapor or filthy scents of scattered smoke, or shooting horrible sparks out of their eyes. Just like you saw Dabu 7 speaking about, they basically labeled this an active volcano at one point, but now they're not so sure, okay, because of the studies on this thing moving, all right, you know, it not acting like an underwater volcano. It's not having those characteristics anymore. And they said there's nothing like this on the planet Earth. It says, verse 19, it says, whereof not only the harm might dispatch them at once, but also the terrible sight utterly destroy them. So just the sight, you know, of seeing these newly created unknown wild beasts, and especially Leviathan, you know, people will lose the spirit. All right, go straight to the spirit world. All right, back in Job chapter 41 and verse 19, it says, out of his mouth go burning lamps and sparks out, fire leap out. Let's read this in NLT. Lightning leaps from its mouth, flames of fire flash out, smoke streams from its nostrils, like steam from a pot overheated, over burning rushes. Its breath would kindle coals, or flames shoot out from its mouth. So this colossal creature, matter of fact, I'm gonna switch the screen real quick. All right, here we go. Yeah, like you see, Esau puts it in his movies. Like he got the movies concerning the Kraken, Godzilla. All right, and going into that so-called old folklore, and also, going into the history of these various different nations. They all have a story, or even so-called eyewitness accounts of a very very large sea creature. Okay, back in Job chapter 41, continuing on in verse 21, it says, its breath would kindle coals, for flames shoot from its mouth. The tremendous strength in Leviathan's neck strikes terror wherever it goes. And we just read in Psalms 104, hey, Leviathan, he plays with ships. All right. It says, its flesh is hard and firm, and cannot be penetrated. Right. Let's click on this real quick. So these ships that have gone missing very well could have just got swallowed up by this colossal creature Leviathan, disappeared, because the disappearances of these ships and planes in the Bermuda Triangle, with all of Esau's technology and his capabilities, have not found a remnant, not a piece of wood, not an article of clothing from these disappearances of these ships and the crew members on them. Okay. It says, its flesh is hard and firm and cannot be penetrated. Its heart is hard as a rock, hard as a millstone. When it rises, the mighty are afraid, gripped by terror. Going into what we read in Wisdom of Solomon, the 11th chapter, the 19th verse, right? It says, verse 26, no sword can stop it, nor spear, dart, or javelin. Iron is nothing but straw to that creature, right? So iron to him is nothing. As of straw, you take a piece of straw and you break a piece of straw and consume it, hold it in your hands, right? Well, to Leviathan, that's how iron is, and iron is considered one of the strongest metals, if not the strongest. It says iron is nothing but straw to that creature, and bronze is like rotten wood. You take a piece of rotten wood, it damn near crumbles, right in your hands with little to no effort. It says arrows cannot make it flee. Stones shot from a sling are like bits of grass. Clubs are like blade of grass, and it laughs at the swish of javelins. And I'm reading this in the NLT. Verse 30, its belly is covered with scales, and sharp as glass, it plows up the ground as it drags through the mud. So when Leviathan moves at the bottom of the sea, he makes trenches. He makes a form, okay, in the crust of the earth. Verse 31, Leviathan makes the water boil with its commotion. It stirs the depths like a pot of ointment. Going back to that statement at Dabu 7 concerning that article or whatever the document he's reading from about, this 12-mile long structure in the ocean, right? It says they were saying fire, okay, or volcanic material was coming from this underwater structure, but they're now starting to believe that it was not a underwater volcano anymore. Okay, it says Leviathan makes the water boil with its commotion. It stirs the depths like a pot of ointment. The water glistens in its wake, making the sea look white. Nothing on earth is its equal, right? It says nothing on earth is its equal. It says no other creature so fearless. Of all the creatures, it is the proudest. It is the king of the beast, right? And I believe that was one of the Godzilla movie titles. It was either King of Monsters or King of Beast, right? Yeah, like you see right here, because There have been reports of these openings in the water, these big swirls. Okay, where you can just get swallowed up, and it very well could just be Leviathan under the water opening up his mouth, which would create a swirling deep swell like that could just engulf a whole ship. you know, just clicking on some of these things, and this is concerning. I just typed in Bermuda Triangle and sea serpents, and this is what popped up. You see this giant sea serpent swallowing a plane, right? You got a giant shark, which there are giant sharks multiple times bigger than the great white, because the great white is considered, one of the biggest sharks. But there's sharks out there that, you know, uh, eat great white sharks. Okay. Giant sea serpents. I mean, giant, uh, sea creatures like, giant squids and giant octopuses. Just like we read this, the great and wide sea, which is very vast, has, you know, a numerous beasts, both small and great. Let's do something real quick. Yeah, and most of you probably seen the Godzilla movies. Very good movies. Yeah, where does Esau get, the criteria of certain movies like Godzilla? He gets that from the scriptures. A lot of the movies Esau does, he's actually taken it from the Bible. Even some of the visions and ideas of certain movies, which are given to these movie creators by Yahweh, by Shem Shai. All right. Let's read verse 33 and 34 again. Job 41 in NLT. It says, "Nothing on earth is its equal, no other creature so fearless. Of all the creatures, it is the proudest, it is the king of beasts." Right? And one of the movie titles for one of the Godzillas was King of Monsters. Right? So Esau takes from the scriptures to create his movies. Right? And the Lord puts a spirit on these various different movie creators, to go into the scriptures, make these movies that we see, which most people look at as myths, as folklores, as not being truth. Right? Esau puts the UFOs, which he attaches aliens to these UFOs, which we know that those UFOs are the vehicles of the angels, right? The chariots. And the one who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ is returning the same way he left. He left on a chariot. He's going to return on a chariot, a so-called UFO, a so-called UAP, right? And that's the curse that goeth forth through the whole earth. And Esau is going to try to fight Yahweh Shai and the angels. He's going to try to fight those so-called UFOs. So he has to portray that, the so-called UFOs, all right, as you've seen, at first was just, a myth. Now he has addressed it as not being a myth, and he's attaching, these are, these unidentified flying objects. Well, aliens, there's creatures in them. Because soon there's going to be an all-out order to, hey, we need all hands on deck, the Navy, the Army, the Marines, the Air Force, Esau Space Force program. We're under attack. We got to go fight these UFOs, these UAPs. Okay. What was it? Ronald Reagan made a statement. Would we not all come together as the human race if an extraterrestrial force, okay, was an extraterrestrial force, threatened, basically the human population? Let's close out on Amos, the 9th chapter. Let's go down to verse 2. Let's start in verse 1. It says, "I saw the Lord standing upon the altar, and he said, Smite the lintel of the door, that the post may shake, and cut them in the head, all of them. And I will slay the last of them with the sword. He that fleeth of them shall not flee away, and he that escapeth of them shall not be delivered. Though they dig into hell, thence shall my hand take them. Though they climb up to heaven, thence will I bring them down. You know, these wicked elites are going to seek to hide and ride out the great destruction that's going to take place. Consider that the height of World War III via the intercontinental ballistic missiles and that chariot fire, right? They're going to go into the various different bunkers outside of America, Babylon the Great, and these various other lands and regions. They're going to try to hide at the bottom of the sea. They're going to try to hide in space. Verse 3, and though they hide themselves in the top of Carmel, I will search and take them out thence. And though they be hid from my sight in the bottom of the sea, thence will I command the serpent, and he shall bite them. So Esau, you can't run and you can't hide. Though you may, go down to your various different bunkers and various different locations and using the technology that Yahweh Bashem Yahushua has given you, right? You're just going to be the first fruits of slavery. The Lord's going to get you from your hiding place, and you're going to be taken in chains under the hands of the so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, right? And you're going to bow before our feet, which is spoken about, I believe, and that's Isaiah the 60th chapter, okay? I'll leave the link in the description box. Once again, Lord willing, this was edifying. I want to give all honor, glory, and praises to Yahweh, Bahashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rachahakodash. Double honors to the head apostle, that is a great millstone, who rule well and teach well. To the next time, Shalom.